Okay, so let's find out who our speaker for tonight is. Sorry, it's me. That's all you're getting this evening is me, and that just means I need to swap my slide deck. This was Paul at the end of last year asked if I would speak this month, in part because January can be quite tricky to find speakers in, and I hadn't realised, but he also was like, and we're not going to get another speaker, so it's just you, and maybe you could talk about reInvent 2025, which we will get into. For those of you who don't know reInvent, reInvent is the AWS sales conference that happens annually towards the end of November or early December. It's always immediately after Thanksgiving, which the Americans really like because they ripped away from their families to go and spend a week in the desert with 60,000 of their closest friends. It's always in Las Vegas, which is the worst place in America, or certainly the worst place I've been to in America, with the possible exception of Dallas-Fort Worth Airport's lounge, which was shocking and full of people with big hats and terrible, terrible refreshments. Not only is it in Vegas, but they take over almost all of Vegas. It's a huge endeavor. It happens across a great many of the casinos there. They run shuttle buses. The first few years I went, they actually built a temporary bridge over one of the roads so you could get from one casino to the car park of another. They changed that because there's a new building built there now. But it's insanely big, and the photos I have of it are sort of not really. They don't really put it into context. But if you go to reInvent, you can expect that it's a pretty hefty affair, with the exception of the one that was immediately after COVID, which was brilliant because it was like a third the size, but very pleasant. For those of you who has been to Vegas, like a quick show of hands ever, not just for reInvent, but more generally. Okay, this is what you might have in mind when you're thinking of Vegas. Suave gentlemen in black tie and women in beautiful evening dresses. This is a still from Ocean's 11, of course, photographed in Vegas some time ago. Still a great film, still stands up, not so much the sequels. Unfortunately, Hollywood has completely, with the exception of The Hangover, lied to us about what Vegas actually is like. It is a loud and dirty assault on the senses. If you stay in one of the hotels on the Strip and you walk to the Venetian, you are walking through vagrancy and urine and the smoke of cannabis smokers. But inside, it's 60,000 sweaty nerds all showing up to learn about cloud stuff. To get the scale of this is one of the places in which you can get food at the conference. This is part of this room. And this is one of, I think, sort of 6 places where food is served. The catering is at an astounding scale you just cannot imagine. I'm fairly handy in the kitchen, and to see this sort of come out and feed this many people hot food, well nutritionally balanced, on a sort of turnover of tables is quite something. It's always quite impressive to me, more so than the tech sometimes actually. But we'll get onto that. There are at a reInvent. This is me. This might have been the year after COVID. Actually, my barber did me really dirty on the mustache. I'm like, what have you done? Like, he took the mustache all the way off, and I'm like, okay, fine. I'm about to get on a flight to America looking like I'm part of the Taliban. But it was fine. It was all right. There are this time around there are 3,500 sessions in varying sizes. And 3,000 speakers. It's a big thing, and it's quite tricky to get to everything you want to see. There's a sort of virtual queuing system, but there's a lot of great content there. There's a lot of shit content there as well, but there's a lot of great content there, and I'll have some details later about where you can find the recordings of some of that in case you're curious. But for me, like the best thing about reInvent really is the people. I have a community of friends from all over the world now, actually, as a result of my work in this kind of community or within the AWS Ambassador community, and it's great to spend some time with those people. In part because a lot of these people are also AWS partners, and you get to sort of share commiseration stories about how awful Amazon is to work with as an organization. This is kind of what it's about for me. I actually didn't go last year after having the year before. I sold the business that November. November, and then like 2 weeks later I was on a plane to Vegas, and it just wipes me out. I was like, I'm not doing reInvent this year. So what you're getting today is updates that I watched on the internet from my house instead of from an enormous conference room. But the information is still valid, so they don't show different things in the space versus at home. So today we're going to have a look at the things that took my interest. This isn't an exhaustive list of everything that happened at reInvent, because if we were to cover everything that happened at reInvent and also the pre-invent period before that, we would be here until the next meetup next month, because there's quite a lot. But I'm going to talk about the things that I thought were interesting, and I thought would be sort of generally applicable to a larger audience. Bear in mind as we go through this, not everything I'm talking about is generally available. Some of it was announced in preview. Some of it is coming soon, which is Amazon speak for. We haven't finished it yet. Those of you who remember EKS, when that was announced at reInvent, it took them about 1 or 2 years to launch that for people to actually use. If it is available, it isn't necessarily available in every region either, so bear that in mind. I haven't put those details on these slides, but you can find that information on the product pages that are relevant. So we're going to start with security and governance, because that's an important topic that's exciting to. I find security and governance exciting, sue me. One of the big things that we use the Scale Factory in the security and governance space is Control Tower. Hands up if you're using Control Tower. Those of you who don't have your hands up, why not? It is the way to run multiple AWS accounts and keep them secure to a defined baseline. One of the things that was annoying about Control Tower was that if you added new accounts to your organization, you had to do some manual steps to get your security baseline applied to it. That is now automated away, so as your accounts move into an OU or move between OUs, the security baselines that relate to that are automatically applied as you move those around, which makes life super easy and means that you don't forget to accidentally turn on the security for something that's going to production, which is always a good thing to avoid. So that's good. Also in the Control Tower and organizations arena is something called tag policies. Some of you might be used to using IAM policies to enforce tagging requirements on resources that are created, and this is sort of good practice around particularly cost allocation or making sure that you know which resources relate to which team or which customer. It is now possible to bake tag policies into the organization in config, rather than it just being a side effect of something that you could already do with IAM. And the thing that's cool for me about this is that you can, marking these tags as required, the tools like Terraform and Pulumi and other infrastructure as code tools can now interrogate the API of this tagging policy tool and make sure that you are adding those tags at plan time. So if you write Terraform plan, one of the things it's doing is it evaluates what changes it needs to make, is looking to see whether or not the tag policies or the tags that you've added are in keeping with the policies, and if not, it won't let you continue the plan and apply. So that'll save an awful lot of pain and suffering, I think, for those of you who are used to using Terraform to provision resources in a world where IAM is limiting policies. Those would blow up at apply time, and that gets pretty annoying. So this is pretty good. One of those kind of things that doesn't sound that interesting, but it actually is probably going to remove a lot of friction for a bunch of people. So it's super good. Also, organization level, you can now block public access to S3 at that point. So within your organization, you can make sure that nothing in S3 is public. Previously, you could only do that at the account level. And so now you should never accidentally, as one of our customers did, they'll remain nameless, allow public access to scans of people's driving licenses and so forth. That was a particularly heinous example of public S3 buckets. Now you can prevent it, as long as you turn this on, of course. If you don't know to turn it on, then you're out of luck. You're on your own. Also in the security landscape, guard duty extended threat detection. For those of you who don't know what guard duty is, it's a tool to watch what's going on in your infrastructure and post alarms about anything that looks weird. And weird is sort of based on an AI's understanding of what you usually do in those accounts and what also usually goes on infrastructure sort of globally. So Amazon are using information they have about how people run accounts across the world to figure out whether what's going on in your account is currently odd. My favorite example from Guard Duty is we had a customer who was building a financial services product. The CTO, Simon, usually works in London, but he flew to Singapore, I think it was, to go and visit a customer. And he logged in to the console from Singapore, and Guard Duty lit up and said, "Hey, Simon's logging from Singapore. That's pretty weird. He doesn't usually do that." That was pretty cool. So now, extended threat detection was something that was added to EKS, the Kubernetes platform, about a year ago, if memory serves, or maybe 6 months ago. But it's now supports EC2 and ECS. And what it's doing is it's using an agent that runs in that infrastructure to watch what's happening in the running processes, as well as just looking at the network and the logs. So it's looking for things like data exfiltration, credential exfiltration, privilege escalation, things that are sort of weird and dodgy. Guard Duty is now able to alarm on those in a bit more detail. And this is just a good example of, I think, the power of using managed services for a lot of things. For my money, if you're building on Amazon, you should be adopting as many of their managed services as you can where you have a need for that type of service, rather than buying it from a third party, because A, it's all within the same ecosystem, and B, these things are constantly evolving, they're constantly getting better, and they get better with the knowledge that AWS have of running global infrastructure. So Guard Duty just quietly gets a little bit better, S3 just quietly gets a little bit better, and for the most part, with these sorts of tools, you don't have to think about it, which is great. Who likes VPNs? No, good. VPNs, in my experience working with technical companies who have non-technical members of staff, VPNs are the place that causes the most stupid support questions. You know, I can't get at this. Is your VPN on? Oh no, I forgot. Like that kind of workflow is like a thing that always happens. Now, you can use mutual TLS authentication in CloudFront, which means that you can kill off your VPNs finally. You could do that before anyway, but this just makes it a bit easier. So mutual TLS authentication, this is where your client, let's say your browser on your desktop, has a certificate baked into it by your IT team, and that certificate has been created from a certificate authority that is owned by your business, and so you can know for certain that that certificate relates to you or that computer in some way. What MTLS allows you to do is to have both your computer validate that the service it's talking to is also from the same certificate authority, and it also allows that service to validate that you are who you say you are, and this now can happen at the edge in CloudFront, and properties of the certificate, things like the distinguished name, which you might create uniquely per user or per device, those details are then passed through in the request headers to the back end, so you can take different action based on what is in those headers. So it's if you haven't used MTLS like this, it can be a little tricky to follow. But if you just think, if I'm using VPNs now for my staff to access resources that they need to use for their jobs, maybe I can get rid of that and make everything a bit easier. Who's using containers in production today? Yes, I should think so. It is 2026 after all. Container stuff that went on at reInvent. So EKS, anyone using EKS? Yeah, a couple of Kubernetes sufferers. So EKS is a managed control plane for Kubernetes. So it's as I mentioned, it took Amazon like 2 years to release it when they realized that people wanted to use Kubernetes instead of their thing, and they caught up. And EKS is essentially a managed control plane for Kubernetes, where all of that infrastructure runs on AWS's platform. So all you have to do is say, I'd like one of those. EKS is spun up, and you can then talk to it using the Kubernetes APIs and provision your applications onto there if that's the thing that you're doing. Existing EKS deployments scale elastically, so as your demand goes up or as you are doing more with those APIs, then Amazon is scaling up the EKS stuff in the back. Now, as of reInvent or a little before, users who have large and demanding Kubernetes infrastructure can pre-provision larger amounts of EKS resource in order to deal with that. So again, it's one of those things that's sounds fairly basic, but for customers who are doing huge things for Kubernetes, you can think of this as, if you're running Kubernetes as part of your Black Friday campaign or whatever, those are the sorts of things that might scale up pretty rapidly, where the auto-scaling is perhaps going to cause you trouble. This allows you to provide predictable performance at scale for those kind of events. AWS Secret Store CSI driver. I've got Gemma in the room. Hello, Gemma. Gemma and I used to work together, and she was always bemused at all of the nomenclature that we used to use in the DevOps world. We had Puppet Hygiene and cucumbers and vagrants and that sort of thing. The Secret Store CSI driver has nothing to do with the people that solve crime on the television. If you're using Kubernetes on AWS, you're probably using the CSI driver that allows you to get at secrets stored within the AWS primitives for managing secrets. It's just the way that you would probably do that if you were on AWS. Previously, you would have to install that CSI driver yourself. It is now available as part of the EKS add-on store. The add-on store has all of the things that you might want to use with a sort of, if you're deploying Kubernetes in a fairly standard AWS idiomatic way, then you'll find those things in there. So over time, Amazon are removing the need for us to add our own stuff to Kubernetes to get the right results out of it. And it's nice to see a blessed way of deploying this, because they're then going to version control it and patch it and do all the things that we would otherwise have to do. That's one more thing that you don't have to worry about if you are running Kubernetes on AWS. I mean, you're running Kubernetes on AWS, you've got to worry about that, but like the details of it are a bit more taken care of for you. In addition, as of just before reInvent, it is now possible to back up your EKS clusters using AWS Backup. Who's using AWS Backup for their backups on the platform? 2 hands there. That's a good answer. Okay, you should be using AWS Backup to back up your stuff on AWS. If you are not backing anything up at all, you are in terrible trouble. You should go home and deal with that now. If you are backing stuff up using anything that isn't AWS Backup, I would urge you to have a look at it. It's the type of service that takes a lot of boring drudge work out of running good backups and restore capabilities. And now, if you're using EKS, you can use AWS Backup to back up your Kubernetes clusters config, and also persistent volumes as well, and also to restore test those things as well. So if you are not currently backing up your EKS cluster, this is the thing to look at. If you are currently backing it up using other tools, particularly third-party tools that are taking your data out of the platform, which is never good, this might be one to look at as well. And if you're sick of Kubernetes, but you still want to run containers, and in particular, if your container workload is relatively straightforward, let's say you're getting started and you're just running one container with your, let's say, Drupal application in, because we were talking to Andy about Drupal earlier. I haven't touched that in a long time, thankfully. But if you are using that in containers, you can now use Amazon ECS Express mode, which is a simple way of provisioning an ECS. I think it's be a Fargate container probably, and get those up and running. And this Express mode takes care of things like domain names, it takes care of networking and load balancing, auto scaling, and crucially, and something that I appreciate about these types of tools. The same is broadly true of the EKS story actually, the EKS auto mode. Once it's up, you can then use the standard APIs for interacting with those things. So if you use ECS Express mode to stand up a container that is running and it's creating your domain name and your load balancer and all that kind of stuff, if you want to in future, or if circumstances require that you have a bit more control over those things, you can just go and modify those primitives. You're not sort of stuck in this dummy world as you might be in, say, Elastic Beanstalk or something if you're using that, which I've hated forever. And I've put this in the containers section because For me, that's the most compelling kind of use case for this. But AWS Private Link, anyone know what AWS Private Link is? Quick show of hands. Those who don't know what AWS Private Link is, I think it's one of the great underrated AWS services, and even more so now, it's just got greater. Private Link allows you to take a resource that's running somewhere else, whatever that is, and make it appear as though it's in your VPC. So it provisions a network interface with IP address from your VPC range, and to all intents and purposes, it just looks like a local resource. That's really good for security stuff. There are some really interesting SaaS use cases if you want to ask me about that later. But up until recently, Private Link only allowed you to make those link connections with resources that were in the same region as you. And now there is cross-region connectivity. It's one of those things that, oh great, now you can connect to another region. Hundreds of engineers worked for months on making this possible, and they're just, oh yeah, you just connect to another region now. Super useful. The reason why I think this is useful for people running containers, and a use case that's come up for us and our customers recently, if you are running an Elastic, so if you're running an Elastic Container Registry, an ECR registry, with your container images in it, and you are provisioning your infrastructure in lots of different regions, then either you need to make that ECR registry available to all of the regions that you're serving infrastructure from, in which case you've got cross-regional bandwidth requirements to move that thing around, or you are copying every container image that you create across multiple regions, so it's in an ECR for every region. Now with cross-region connectivity for Private Link, you can create a VPC endpoint, a Private Link endpoint in your VPCs in every region that all map to a single ECR registry where you publish your images, and that's going to be cheaper from a networking perspective because you're not using NAT gateway or something for moving that data around. It's also more secure because you can just sort of lock it all down, and go that it's coming from here. So super useful. It's worth looking at if you are currently running in multiple regions with your container workloads. But equally, like, go and have a look at Private Link in general. You can do some really cool stuff with it. Right, we've talked about containers. Those are sort of servers, aren't they? Serverless. Anybody running serverless applications? AWS Lambda. Good. That's good because like every other call for papers response we get to this user group is about serverless in some fashion. So it's good to see that that's relevant to this audience. The thing that I found interesting about the serverless updates at reInvent last year is that you can now run them in a serverful way with AWS Lambda managed instances. Bear with me. This is useful. So one of the issues with Lambda is that if you're building an infrastructure that is using Lambda, but those Lambdas are invoked very regularly, sort of all the time. Your sort of steady state background workload hitting Lambda is really consistent. Eventually, or very quickly, it gets more expensive than running the same workload on physical servers, and then you lose the benefit of Lambda, which is all the sort of deployment tools and the other bits and pieces around that. So Amazon have recognized that this is a problem for people and have built a way to run your Lambdas inside EC2 compute that you provision using the Lambda console, and you create something called a I've lost my presenter notes. They're down the bottom of the screen here. A capacity provider. So you create a capacity provider, and that is you give it an EC2 instance type, as you might do if you were provisioning any old EC2 instance. And Amazon will provision those EC2 instances and install the Lambda runtime on it and make that infrastructure capacity available to run your Lambdas on. That means that you can run, for example, Lambdas that require GPU hardware. You can provision a capacity provider that's got GPUs in it. They've been promising GPU support in Lambda for ages, and I don't think it ever materialized, so this is now the way that you would do that. And from a cost perspective, not only does that mean that you can predict your steady state cost for Lambda because you've got an amount of provisioned compute, those EC2 instances can also then be managed by your cost controls for EC2. So if you've got savings plans and that sort of stuff, then those cost savings will work on and apply on this stuff as well. I'd imagine also in future it may be possible for you to build a capacity provider that runs in your own infrastructure or at the edge, or maybe on an outpost rack, which would also allow for more interesting use of Lambda outside the AWS landscape itself. Currently supports Node.js and Java.NET and Python. Support for other runtimes was coming soon at reInvent, so I imagine that's still coming soon because we've had Christmas since then. But interesting stuff. The other thing in terms of cost, typically if you're running Lambdas, you would be paying per Lambda invocation. If you are using this model, you are paying for the EC2 instances that you provision, plus a 15% management fee to pay AWS for looking after that for you, but you don't pay the invocation charges. There are some other caveats, but that's the sort of the broad strokes of it. Running Lambda at scale, you can now do more cheaply if you have a steady state workload that requires you to run those things all the time, and it'll still look like Lambda, which is the crucial thing. The other thing of interest that set the internet aflutter, certainly all the people I know who do things with AWS were very excited about this, is AWS Lambda durable functions. So today, well, prior to reInvent, if you had long-running serverless workflows where, let's say you kind of maybe you send something to a user and then you want to kind of wait for them to click on a thing in an email, or those sorts of like things that are very asynchronous but over long periods of time. You'd have to do that with step functions. So you create a step function that executes a bit of Lambda and then has a wait state and is waiting for something else to happen. Well, now you can do all of that waiting and stuff inside the Lambda functions themselves. If you're using today JavaScript and Python, the SDK for those languages adds methods to the Lambda runtime to add checkpoints and replay to your business logic. And so let's say you write your Lambda so that it's sending an email to a customer, and then you're waiting for the customer to click on a link and for that to come back. Instead of using a step function, you can now put a wait state in your code itself, and then when the request comes back, Lambda will start that function again. It will skip over the checkpoints it's already achieved, and then start running your code where it left off within the time frame of a year, which is reasonable, I would say. There are non-trivial pricing dimensions in this, so it's slightly more complex than the step functions in that regard. It's also currently only in Ohio, which I'm sure you're all running workloads in, because Ohio is where we're deploying to from UK, right? And there are other considerations about if your code has to be deterministic. If it uses random functions or there's anything based on timestamps, those checkpoints might not all work properly. You remember Jen Trey came to talk to us about Lambda here, well not here, the other venue, earlier in the year. If you find him on LinkedIn, he posted today on LinkedIn about some of the caveats he's found with this stuff, and Jen is like the guy that you want to listen to as far as Lambda is concerned. So interesting stuff if you are currently living in step function hell, because authoring those can be awkward, debugging them can be awkward. You're sort of writing logic in both step function YAML and also in Lambda in your code. Now you can do all this in one place as long as you're using one of the supported languages. Probably worth a look if you're doing lots of complicated stuff with Lambda. And any Rust fans in the room? You can now run Rust on Lambda. That's now a supported runtime. So your Lambdas can be memory safe and more difficult to write, as far as I can tell. I haven't really looked at Rust. That's pretty glib. Moving on. Who likes cost savings? Yay! We're engineers. We don't give a fuck about the cost of it. I've seen your infrastructure, not all of yours, but I've seen infrastructures that engineers build. So I've only actually got 2 slides, I think, on cost savings. Obviously, the thing I mentioned about Lambda capacity providers can be a cost saving for you. But the big one, Corey Quinn claimed to have made this happen, and we all thought that was bullshit, probably. Actually, incidentally, the pictures I showed of me with people at reInvent, one of the guys in there is Corey's business partner. Nobody knows who he is. He's like the quiet guy who picks everything up after Corey's been there. But database savings plans, this is the big one. People who've been asking these for a while. Offers up to 35% savings on your database infrastructure. In true Amazon fashion, that 35% applies to very specific, I think it's serverless database deployments. If you're using Aurora serverless, you can save 35%, which is good because that was expensive anyway. You can also save up to 18% on DynamoDB, and the savings plans support Aurora, RDS, DynamoDB, ElastiCache, DocumentDB, Neptune, Keyspaces, TimeStream, and Database Migration Service, which has never worked as far as we can tell. Savings plans, for those of you unaware, this is where you are committing a certain amount of long-term spend to AWS, and in return they'll say, okay, you can have that a bit cheaper, and so you're committing to using those database resources for say 3 years, for example, at that kind of sizing, and your bill gets cheaper as a result. There are other ways of saving money for long-term commitments with AWS, but as I say, we're engineers, we don't care about that. SQL Server has some savings available now as well. You can now optimize the CPU usage of your SQL Server instances and change the vCPU core count to remove cores that you're not using. So obviously if you're using the cores, don't take them away because it'll make everything suck. But if you are actively not using some of those cores, you can now remove them from your instances. And because SQL Server is built on a per CPU core basis, as though it was the 90s, that is now going to be a saving for you as well. The other thing in the SQL Server realm, for those of you who are saddled with that in the Microsoft environment, SQL Server Developer Edition, you can now deploy that in your dev environments because that doesn't have licensing costs. So if you use AWS to launch a SQL Server Developer Edition, it will launch a Windows Server EC2 instance with that database installed on it, and then you don't pay your license fees for that in those environments. Other things that I found interesting, this didn't sort of defy categorization, or if I'd created categories it would have been a category of one, so we won't dwell on that. Every year at reInvent there's a bunch of new instance types. It's actually quite dull in and of itself because they just stand there and go, list a load of like letters on the screen and go, this is a new instance type. But the things that are interesting here, AWS build their own silicon. For those of you who were here for Andrew Langhorne's talk a couple of months ago about how the Nitro hypervisor works, a lot of that is possible because Amazon have teams that build their own hardware. And not only are they building the hypervisor hardware that manages things like storage and networking and so forth for Nitro and manages the security of that, they also build their own chips. The first one they released was called Graviton. It's an ARM-based chip. And the thing that's interesting about this is that Graviton and Amazon's other chips can be built in such a way as to benefit the types of workloads that they know run on their platform, because they can run inspections of with customers' consent. They can look at how applications run on hardware and then tweak the design of the chip to suit. So Graviton 5 has twice the number of cores of Graviton 4 because they've realized that people quite like that, or it's quite useful for the types of workloads that people run. They've also increased the size of the level 3 cache to reduce cache misses, and that improves performance as well. If you found Langhorne's talk interesting last time, or you find the idea of people talking about the hardware that Amazon build interesting, one of the keynotes at reInvent is worth going back and rewatching. The Peter DeSantis keynote, which is kind of how the sausage is made. Like, he covers a lot of these details, and it's pretty interesting. Trainium 3. Trainium is another ARM-based core, ARM-based chip built by AWS, customized to the needs of training AI models or machine learning models. It's also actually really good for inference workloads as well, so they regret calling it Trainium, as I understand it. But Trainium 3 will process 5 times the number of tokens per megawatt than Trainium 2 did. And it also has on-chip support for for workload profiling, and you can profile your ML training on inference workloads without affecting the performance of it, and the tooling to do that, if you are training your own AI models, the tooling for that will be available soon by all accounts. Trainium 4 is also coming soon. There are also new instance types based on Intel Xeon 6 and the AMD EPYC CPUs, which are optimized for, I think, networking throughputs, or maybe memory optimized. You can go and find those in the ever-increasing list of new instances. You can also now run bare metal instances of M3 Ultra and M4 Max Mac Minis. which if you're building things like CI workers to build your software on Mac, for example, you might be interested in looking at. Who's running on more than one cloud, like AWS and one of the other things? Yeah, I don't agree with multi-cloud. I think it's mostly bullshit. You probably shouldn't be. But if you have to, and there are good reasons for it. It's not because then you can argue pricing with Amazon for your, $2,000 a month bill. That's the CFO folly. But if you are running significant workloads on both AWS and currently Google Cloud, AWS Interconnect, this is in preview now, AWS Interconnect will allow you to connect your VPC network to the equivalent in your other cloud, which allows for private, secure, dedicated bandwidth between those locations. If you did that now, you would probably have to create a private link connection and whatever Google call that, and then try and sort of connect all that together. AWS Interconnect now will take the pain of that away. There's also talk of AWS Interconnect Last Mile, which is in preview, and I think only in the US and with one network provider at the moment, allowing you to connect your VPCs to your branch offices or data centers or other remote locations. I'm not entirely sure how that differs from Direct Connect, but I'm sure more will become clear as they take that into GA. Another SQL. There's a lot of SQL Server stuff in here. Is anyone actually using SQL Server in the room? I mean, No, nobody's using SQL Server. Probably for the best. Anyway, you can now add... so Resource Governor is a feature of SQL Server that allows you to limit CPU and memory on a per database basis within one running database instance. And people have been sort of asking for this because if you're building SaaS, for example, and you're using SQL Server as the backing database for that, you'd quite like to be able to say, this customer can't affect this customer in terms of CPU usage and so forth. So that is now available for RDS and SQL Server for those of you who care, who appears to be nobody in this room. Great. Updates to Amazon S3. Who's using S3? Everyone's using S3. Whether you know it or not, S3 is in your life somewhere. Amazon S3 now supports objects of up to 50 terabytes, in case you're, I don't know, CERN or somebody, throwing particles at each other and writing down literally everything that happens about it. That's such a ludicrously large number, I can't begin to imagine how many customers actually need that, but you can now put objects. It'd be a multi-part upload, I think. It'd probably take a little while. Batch operations are now 10 times faster as well. This is another good example. Like S3 just keeps getting better. It's a huge, huge service with hundreds of microservices and hundreds of developers working on it. And it's, as far as I can tell, never gone down. It's just runs forever. So now everything in batch is a little bit quicker, which is great for people using batch operations. S3 tables was something that was released at the previous reInvent. You can dig into the details of that. I'm not going to go into that, but they are now cheaper and more easily replicated across regions. There's a bunch of AI workload use cases for that, which is probably why I don't care. S3 access points also now are supported by FSX for NetApp ONTAP, which if you are someone from NetApp, probably not. They were sponsoring us for a while, but I don't think they come anymore. The S3 access points are where you can get at objects in S3 through the file system interface that you're talking to. So in this case, FSX for NetApp ONTAP is your NetApp file system. You can address certain parts of your file hierarchy on the filer to be objects in S3, and that just happens behind the scenes without you having to think about it. And I think finally for this section, we did it. Code commit is not going to be end of life. Congratulations, everyone. So in July 2024, AWS fuck code commit. No one uses that. We're not going to. In fact, you can't create new code commit repos anymore. Suck that up. And it turns out that although code commit is not a very popular way of hosting Git repositories, it is a really good way for businesses that have regulatory requirements, because it's a Git repo that lives in your AWS infrastructure, and it's got IAM policies attached to it, and it's a thing that if you use it instead of GitHub, you can just forget about a whole bunch of security risks. And so all of those customers had a good old moment at their account managers, and Code Commit is now back in general availability with a bit of a, I don't think it was an apology. I think apologies is strong language. I don't think I saw the word sorry in there anyway. It was a bit kind of hand-wringy. You can go and read the blog post. It's like, oh, we've listened and we heard you. We're not killing it off. So congrats, everyone. Code Commit's good for what it is, for what it's worth. And final section, because it's 2026, well, it was reInvent 25, you can imagine an awful lot of it was about AI, which I've so far managed not to cover. AI, Amazon, like everybody else, is banging on about AI. They're also betting really heavily on agentic AI. They believe that there's a lot of future in agentic AI, which is, you know, that future where autonomous systems go and do things without oversight, and we end up in the Skynet future. They're also, I think the AWS philosophy is really about, let's make it possible for everybody to run whatever models they want, as long as they're available on the platform, securely, switch between them, and provide grown-up tools around governance and management of these things. So kind of not sexy and exciting. It's not like, you know, OpenAI going, hey, we can write music now, or yes, we'll give you investment advice, or whatever it is that those models are doing and shouldn't be. Amazon are like, well, you're going to do this anyway, so let's at least stop you blowing your own feet off with it. So a lot of the updates at reInvent about AI were on that topic largely. If you want a more pro AI meetup, by the way, the next month is going to be a bit more pro AI. So there's a load of new models on Bedrock. Bedrock is Amazon's platform for running large language models and putting those safety features around it. As of reInvent, there's a whole bunch of new models. So there's more to life than OpenAI and Claude. Like if your exposure to AI thus far has been you know, ChatGPT and maybe Gemini, there's an awful lot more to, like, below the surface of the water in this landscape. Amazon have their own models, the Nova models. I haven't tried these myself. I don't know anyone's actually using them. But Nova 2, a whole bunch of new versions of Nova models. Nova 2 Lite, which is a designed to be cheap, basically, inexpensive on a per token basis. It's in general availability. There is a speech-to-speech Nova 2 Sonic, which is in GA. And in preview, Nova 2 Pro, which is for complex and multi-step tasks, sort of longer thinking processes and so forth, like writing software, I guess. Sorry, it's going to put you out of a job, I guess. Nova 2 Omni, which is an all-in-one multimodal model, which can do you know, speech and graphics and everything else. There are 4 new commercial Mistral models available on Bedrock, and a bunch of new open weight models, including Google Gemma, Quen, and some of the OpenAI open weight models that they've published. There's loads there. If you are at all interested in AI and you're at this meetup and you haven't looked at Bedrock, you really need to go and do that, because there's a lot there. In addition, they announced Amazon Nova Forge, which is a mechanism by which you can use SageMaker AI to take a Nova model or a historical training checkpoint from an existing Nova model, and then apply your own training data to that, either data that you have provided or data that Amazon curates for training of models. And this allows you to customize models to your own needs. The use case that they gave they gave 2 use cases. There's one on the blog, which is about pharmaceutical, like drug research. They took an early Nova checkpoint and trained it on pharma things, I guess, and it gave them a load of molecule designs to try and a bunch that they could rule out based on what the model knew about it. Whether or not those are right, nobody knows. Nobody can know. The other example they used on the stage was Reddit. You can imagine that Reddit being the front page of the internet and kind of a cesspool of horror in places. They need a lot of content moderation, and so Reddit have trained a Nova Forge model on improved content moderation, which is pretty cool. It keeps the smut off of your laptop. In addition, Amazon Bedrock Agent Core. This is a platform for running agents yourself on Amazon. So taking away all the kind of headaches around deployment and monitoring, all that kind of stuff, giving you sort of standard ways of doing that if you're building agents. They call it a managed agentic AI platform, obviously. Agent Core Policy allows you to use natural language to describe guardrails, so ways in which you would like to limit the agents from behaving. And that natural language is then translated into a language in AWS called CEDAR, C-E-D-A-R, which is then used to enforce policies on how your agents work. Those policies work agnostic of model, so it's if you write a policy like that, it works even if you swap your LLMs out. An example policy might be if you're building an agentic chatbot to do sort of customer service, you might want to write a policy that says block refunds to customers that are over $1,000 or something. Have that referred to a human for assessment. So interesting stuff. Additionally, in agent core memory, so a lot of problems. If you've ever interacted with a chatbot for customer service, you'll find they're mostly awful. And most of the reason they're awful is that they kind of forget things about you. What's your account number? All right, thanks for that. What is your account number? And they keep doing that kind of stuff. Agent core memory provides primitives within the agent core system that you can access from your code to remember certain things about the interaction that you've had with, or that the agent has had with those customers. So if it sees something that's an account number, it can sort of store that and then apply that to the context of subsequent runs, so that the agent is a bit more intelligent. They demoed on the screen, on the stage, an actual live phone call customer service built on Amazon Connect, talking to a Bedrock agent. It was all pretty cool. Obviously, very staged. Maybe it doesn't work as well as that, but it looked pretty good. Amazon Nova Act. This is a new managed service for developers to build and manage fleets of agents for automating UI process automation. So the people that bought us have a business around robotic process automation, which as far as I can tell is we can't quite manage to migrate this piece of software to a new platform, but what we can do is automate poking the buttons on it so that it's integrated with the new thing that you're building. And so Nova Act would be is a tool to allow you to describe how to interact with the UI as an agent, and that agent will go off and do that for you. So you imagine things like WebDriver and Selenium, those sorts of things. You see sort of use cases around software testing and stuff where those tests are perhaps less brittle because you're describing what outcome you want from the agent rather than click on this part of the DOM, etc. And finally, Kiro is generally available. We had a demo from Ricardo Suarez, I think, last year about Kiro, which is Amazon's Copilot equivalent. It's an IDE for developing software that talks to AWS services in the back end for helping you write software or writing software for you. Kiro specifically is around spec-driven development, so you describe the type of software you would like it to build, and it will build that software. In theory. The other thing that came out of reInvent, somebody from the automated reasoning team came to talk about the work that they do. Automated reasoning is about writing software to validate that certain states in your platform could never occur. So part of the reason why S3 is so available and durable is because they use this automated reasoning stuff to test the software that they're building. That team has worked within Kiro to apply some magic to the code that comes out of Kiro to improve the type of software that it's writing for you. And if you are a startup working on AWS, if you're a qualifying startup, I'm not sure what the qualifying means in this case, but we can look that up, you will receive a year of free access to Kiro for up to 100 seats, which is pretty good. And probably cheaper than Copilot if you want to have a go at that. The other thing that was kind of interesting, they were talking a lot about what they call frontier agents. This is Amazon making up new terminology that they hope will stick, kind of like trying to make fetch happen, I guess. And they're using frontier agent to describe long-running, fully autonomous agents that are designed to operate entire workflows, so slightly kind of bigger in scope and scale than what you might have seen agents do today. And they've built, this is in preview, I think, a very private preview probably, an autonomous agent for writing software, so that you might describe to Kiro how to go and find your ticket stack in Jira, and then let that autonomous agent off, following those tickets and writing code and submitting PRs, turning you as a software engineer into someone who's babysitting a robot, which I'm not sure we all signed up for, but seems to be the way things are going. Cool. So what's next from here? I would recommend watching some of the sessions from reInvent. As I said, there's 3,500 of them. Not all of those are recorded, but all of the breakout sessions are. They're available to view online. If you look for reInvent on demand, this slide deck actually I've got links in, and I will put that up somewhere and make it easy to find. But there's a lot of content there, and it's all sort of split out into areas of interest. There's hours and hours of stuff on there. Re:Invent content tends to be classified as 100, 200, 300, or 400 levels. So if you're a beginner, the 100 stuff is probably where you want to be looking. If you've been using it for a while and you want to see a bit more detail about this stuff, the 400 level content is where it's at. That's the stuff I find most interesting. If you are interested in learning more about AWS in the sort of re:Invent type format, the London Summit will be the 22nd of April. I'm not actually sure if Amazon's released those dates yet, but I saw it in a sponsor prospectus, so I think it's going to happen then. That'll be at Excel. It's one of the largest summits in the world. It's nowhere near as big as re:Invent, but there's a lot of content there, and it's free to sign up as well. re:Invent is like £2,000 a ticket or something. It's ridiculous. But the London Summit is the price of a tube ride, which is pretty useful. Oh, and food from the Excel, obviously, which is punitive. And the next re:Invent this year, excuse me, is going to be 30th of November through to December the 4th. If you are newish to AWS in your career, if you're in the first 5 years of your developer career, there is a grant that AWS put together called the All Builders Welcome Grant that you may not have heard of. You apply for it if you're in the first 5 years of your career. I'm not entirely sure what the detail of the application process is. I imagine that they're probably focused on underrepresented groups. So if you're a white dude, sorry, you've got enough going for you in life. But the All Builders Welcome Grant includes a full conference pass. So that's your £2,000 ticket to re:Invent. Airfare to Vegas, probably economy. Sorry, AWS are quite frugal. 10 hours in the back, no thanks, and hotel accommodations as well. I'm not sure where they put you, probably on the Strip, and that in general, that's probably about $5,000 worth of coverage. So if you are thinking about re:Invent this year, if you search for All Builders Welcome re:Invent, you get last year's thing that says it's all closed, but they will open it up. Typically, re:Invent ticketing opens in about the middle of the year, so sort of June, July time. So keep an eye out for that if you would like to attend re:Invent. That's me done. I'll go back to being the host in a second, but thank you for your attention. If I can answer any questions for you, I will try. Equally, I might not be able to, but Marco's here. Marco works with me, and he's paid much more attention to some of this stuff. So ask Marco is my answer to that. Quick show. Does anybody have any questions? And legitimately down there. Let's microphone. Dave's going to run over to you with a microphone. I may not be able to answer these. Let's try. I don't think the pizza's here yet either, so we've got a little while. Hello. Does the provisioned capacity for Lambda work with spot instances? I don't know, actually. I would be surprised if it does today, but not surprised if it did in future. Does that make sense? I don't actually know. That's a complete guess based on how I know AWS to behave. Yeah, let's look it up. That's probably in the FAQ even. Next question. In the back there.
Thank you. Just a quick question about Lambda instances and all of these EC2. Just how does it work? Just any limitations? Is it available in London? Any regions?
I don't think it's available in London just yet. I think it's not fully regionally available. I'm getting that mixed up with that and the durable executions. But I don't think it's everywhere just yet. But I might be wrong.
Yep. Okay. Thanks for the presentation. From all the updates, basically, which one you were really wanting, or basically you were looking forward to in the coming year?
What was I really? So this time round, I wasn't particularly. I still live in hope that Cognito is going to stop sucking. Every year we get to re:Invent, and there's not another sort of improvement to Cognito announced. I'm a bit disappointed. Yeah, nothing in particular. Sorry, I'm just no. Let me get my other slides up. So nothing in particular stood out. In terms of things that I was impressed by, I think things like the connectivity option, the multi-cloud connectivity option is like, that's weird. That came out of left field for me, I think, but certainly going to be useful for some people. Pizza's here, so I'm going to take one more question and then do the wrap up. One more question. Show hands. everybody wants pizza. Brilliant. Good stuff. I've been John. Thank you very much for your attention.